I bring you inspiring conversations with change makers, social entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who are making a difference. Whether you're looking to boost your impact measurement, learn from innovative projects, or find fresh ideas to transform your work, you're in the right place. Welcome to today's episode of the Make an Impact podcast. Today I'm joined by Charles. Charles, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi Heidi, yes, I'm Charles Rapson. I currently work for the West Midlands Combined Authority as their social economy growth lead. And I say currently work for the West Midlands Combined Authority because it's part of a journey for me that started around 19 years ago when I stumbled across social enterprise, and I've been involved in it ever since then. And the Combined Authority is fairly crucial to helping the economy grow. So I thought, instead of shouting from the car park, I'll come into the building and see what happens there. So that's what I do. I'm a
Social economy champion. So what does it actually mean in reality? What are you doing to champion the social economy?
Okay, so basically, when I was interviewed for the job, they asked me how did I see the role. And I said to them, I'm coming in to make a lot of noise on behalf of the social enterprises and community businesses, and I'm going to steal a lot of your money and I'm going to invest it in the social economy. And they gave me the job, so that's my job description. But what it basically means is it's creating the conditions that are going to allow social economy organizations to grow. And by social economy, social enterprises, community businesses, mutuals, cooperatives, and charities that are trading. So all those bits of what used to be called the third sector that trade and generate some of their income, at least through a business model. That's the bit I'm doing. So it's things like making sure they got access to the right business skills and support, access to finance, access to markets, and the way that we use procurement and the Social Value Act, which you and I have had a few conversations about, raising awareness of the organisations, making it clear to people, particularly within the public sector, what value the social enterprise, social economy provides in terms of their aspirations of growth and jobs and housing and transport and all those things, but for everyone. So that inclusive growth thing, just trying to build awareness and understanding of the importance of the sector.
It sounds like a dream job to me, in
No, I mean,
reality.
in theory, it's a dream job because I get to go in and talk about my favourite subject to people who may not know enough about it and help to convince them that this is really important and it's a resource that the public sector in particular and the private sector could be using in a much more purposeful way because there's the social economy in the West Midlands is big. Before we came on the call, I've been trawling through a list of 9,314 social economy organisations trying to classify them and put them in
Good
order.
luck.
Yeah, I think I'm about a third of the way through the job at the moment, and I've tried AI and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't work. But yeah, it's a huge resource, and it's a body of organisations that probably involves around 100,000 employees and a couple of 100,000 volunteers, at least probably 300,000 plus people who's made it their mission in life to tackle inequality in some form or another, whatever that inequality might be. It might do race, gender, all sorts of different things. So why don't we use it as a resource to ensure that we get inclusive growth for all? And so that's the easy part of it, is actually going in and talking about that, because I can talk for days on the subject to anyone and frequently do. But the hard bit is it's the role involves basically pushing through the paperwork and getting or securing the funding, arguing for the funding, and then the paperwork. There's something called the single assurance framework, which is the bane of my life because it takes so flipping long to get through that process, and then you've got to go through a procurement process, and you've got 12 months worth of money, and 6 months are gone before you actually get out the door to do anything with it. So it's a bit of a challenge for me at the moment in trying to change the system. So I get meddled in a lot of ways, but a lot of the time I spend actually pushing paperwork around and writing reports and filling in forms and working out the social impact of whatever program I'm proposing.
Look at the social impact of programs, but I'd leave the moving paper around and
Mm.
pushing reports in under people's noses to you.
It's an interesting challenge because it frustrates the heck out of me because the single assurance framework and the governance procedures in the public sector are really cumbersome. But the taxpayer in me is actually quite grateful for them because I think the diligence and scrutiny that stuff goes under is actually quite intense. So at least if you're a taxpayer, you know that your money has been thought about very carefully before it's actually spent. So that's why I can do it.
And you mentioned that you started out in the world of the social economy sector 19 years ago. I'm
Yeah.
sure it wasn't called the social economy sector. So
Oh,
was that an accident or was that something that you
that was
intentionally did?
entirely by accident. That's my wife's fault. She was working for a charity at the time. And somebody mentioned an organization was looking for somebody with project management skills to help them with some funding project they had. And she said, "Oh, I think my wife doesn't really know what I do for a living, actually. But she said, I think it's got something to do with, he managed to manage projects, so maybe that's what it is." So I had a call from a friend of hers to see if I'd go along with a chat with them. I went along and talked to them, and they said, "Look, we can give you 2 weeks worth of, or it's 8 days of consultancy work, and we'll pay you for it." And I was running my own business at the time, which was incredibly building. And I went, just as a break, I thought, yeah, okay, I can do that. And that's when I discovered it purely by accident. That was the Colbridge Trust in Solihull, which you will probably know well, and a lot of people will know. And I was just blown away by what they do. It's just amazing, these things. And I'd never heard of it before. I was going, why are you doing this? Why aren't you making any money?
Yeah.
And the work I did for them might help them secure some funding to appoint a post as a project officer for a government thing called Change Up at the time, which was Labour, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown's initiative to develop the infrastructure that supports voluntary and community and social enterprise sectors. So when they got the funding, I said, "Do you fancy applying?" I went, "Yeah, actually, I was getting bored to tears of my business. Actually, it was making money, but it was just I was sitting in front of a computer or out visiting used car dealers. So I just went, yes, absolutely, I'll do it." And I just fell in love with the whole concept. So I helped them set up an infrastructure organisation, a CVS type organisation, and then they said, "Can you have a look at these projects?" And they weren't called social enterprises; they were just projects. So I went along and looked at them, and some of them were making money, some of them were losing money, and some of them we should never have been doing in the first place. So I rationalised the whole lot and set up two, what I call them, businesses. And then somebody asked me, "How many social enterprises are there in Solihull?" And I went, "I don't think there's any, is there?" And they went, "No, you're one." Am I? Okay, and then that means there's two then. Oh no, there's three, because the Family Care Trust had a landscaping operation. So I only thought there were three of these things called social enterprise. And I had to Google social enterprise to find out what it was about. And then it made sense. And then I started to get a bit more involved. And it snowballed from there, really.
I love that story that you actually Googled what social
I did.
enterprise is. I think everyone's been there where they
Yeah.
accidentally fall into it and
Yeah.
then they're like, oh, someone says you're a social enterprise and you like you did,
Yeah.
you then go and look it up and find out actually, yeah, we do fit into
Yeah.
that.
Well, I remember one meeting. It was about a week after I started. I was invited along to a meeting by Social Enterprise West Midlands. And I bumped into a lady called Melanie Mills, who you'll know. And she had just joined the social economy as well, but she didn't know it. And both of us stood at the back of the room going, "What are they talking about? What's all this thing?" And I said, "I've Googled it. So this is what I can tell you." She went, "Ah." And I think we both went through this similar journey. I've actually just been in awe of the people that work in the social economy and what they do and why they do it and how they do it. They're just so brilliant people. So they're my passion, is to support them and use whatever skills I've got. I could not do what they do. I'm fairly certain of that. But if I can support them and help them and make life easier for them, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Another question I've got for you then is what would you say has been the biggest achievement so far since you've been in your current role?
I've managed to get 2.5 million so far, and I'm hoping to get a bit more in the future. But what I think the biggest difference I think I've made, there's two things. One is that social economy is now written large into the Combined Authority's business plan. I think it's page 6 or something, actually. There's a title called Growth, and then the next page is Social Economy. So
Yeah.
historically, it would have been mentioned in passing, perhaps, or not mentioned at all, even. But it's up there as a very specific sector to support. It's also in the paper that's gone to government for devolution, along with the everyday, it's sort of lumped in with the everyday economy, but it's still very much part of that, about the West Midlands Combined Authority's commitment to double the size of the social economy. And so to be at that level, and I've actually got people coming to me and asking me the questions now about, can the social economy support this and can we work that, and what's your view on things? I think that is probably the biggest one. And I think the other one is the place-based investments that we've made, where we've got 9 organisations across the borough who are working on an action and investment plan for a specific geography. So they become community hubs or social enterprise hubs. We're thinking of changing the title to either social improvement districts or community improvement districts, because it seems to resonate more easily with people, and its language is very important. And they've been brilliant. They've started to develop some really exciting and ambitious plans, but more importantly, they've brought people together into a forum. So we're reconstructing that social economy infrastructure and networks that used to be quite strong in the West Midlands, but they've basically been wiped out over the years. So the social economy infrastructure at the moment is Sarah Bowman working 2 or 3 days a week when she should have retired. And that's it. But we're starting to rebuild it through those place-based initiatives. If you want to start a social enterprise, they're bringing people together, building relationships, building trust, forming partnerships, and starting to deliver at scale. Helping the Combined Authority understand that sort of investment in place-based investment, and also the concept of unrestricted funding. They're starting to see how that really does empower organisations to do things, because you take away all the pressure, not just time, but the emotional and energy drain that finding core funding brings. So it frees them up to do stuff that's beyond what they can normally do. So I think those are the two things.
Sounds amazing. It sounds like that a lot of progress there, really, in terms of getting the right messages and the right people together to change things, definitely.
I remember my wife telling me I was too assertive at times, and I'm actually finding that's a real benefit and skill in the job I've got at the moment, as being assertive.
Yeah. Or
I have, I,
persistence.
I have changed the way I respond within the community. When I first came into the West Midlands Combined Authority, I was answering questions like, why should we invest in social enterprise? Why should we do that? I think I managed to change the dialogue, so I now ask questions. Why wouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? Why won't you? And get them to come up with reasons why they wouldn't invest in the social economy. And it's quite hard to argue against it. So I'm changing the way that we talk about it.
Excellent. So one of the things that you mentioned in passing a few minutes ago was about social value.
Mm,
I think that we need to have a little chat about
yeah.
social value. What's your perspective on social
Right.
value?
Social value, it's got a lot of baggage, that term, to it. I mean, I was fortunate. I used to work for the same company as Chris Wright, the guy, the MP for Leamington and Warwick, when he pushed that through as a private member's bill. So when I heard that's what he was doing after MG collapsed, because we were both worked there, I took an interest in it, and I managed to have a conversation with him about what did he mean by this. And basically, he was saying about ensuring that we leverage as much impact at a local level. And the story behind it was that it was when a rail contract was awarded to a German company, when Bombardier and Dudley were capable of doing it. And as a result of not winning the contract, Bombardier had to lay off hundreds of people in Derby, and it devastated the Derby economy because they were a major employer there. And so the social cost of that decision was immense. It outweighed any savings that they made from the German contract. So that was a response to that. And it's been around for what, a dozen years or more. And I don't think it's had any real impact or effect. I know there's a few companies around who are making a lot of money by measuring social value and running programs on that level. Not, you excluded from that, of course, but there are a lot of big companies making money out of it. So what I'm trying to do, I'm part of a thing called the Social Value Task and Finish group. And the social value task, and finish is in bold capital letters, because we need to get something happening on this. So what I'm trying to do is change the language to, let's talk about social value is an act, and it's a measurement that you can put on things, but that's not what it's about. What we're about is creating impact, leveraging public sector spend in order to create some sort of impact, to be able to leverage that process to secure the resources to do things that we might want to do, but haven't got the resources to do. So using its purchasing power to do that in order to make an impact. So what I'd like to start talking about within procurement is about, instead of asking what's the social value in this that you're offering, it's asking what social impact can you make? And the other thing we're looking at is how do we measure social impact? Because if you're a social enterprise, offering additional social value is pretty impossible because you're already doing 100%. So how can you do more than that? So we'd start to look at how we measure not just added social value for private companies, but intrinsic value for a social enterprise, and measuring them by the same ruler effectively. So your intrinsic value is worth as much as the additional value. Making it contractual, because it's not at the moment. The way that the Social Value Act is applied is haphazard. There's some really good examples, but there's some bad examples, and there's examples where it's just ignored completely. Making it contractual, because at the moment it's not measured, it's not monitored. So as part of the program management or contract management, it will be monitored and they'll be asked to report on it, and it will be measured as well. So we will have a value that we can attach to it. And we're working with national TOMs and rejigging some of those things that are so specific for us. It's not a perfect measure by any means, but it's the one that's commonly used, so we might as well just use it. But it's really about making that much more meaningful. And when we go out and ask about social impact, we can be quite specific. We can provide a shopping list for people bidding for contracts that says these are the areas we'd like to have some impact in. And that could be anything from employment, it could be mental health, it could be environmental, it could be anything. So we'll draw up a shopping list. So depending on the contract that's going out, you can pick a menu of things. I had an interesting conversation with the corporate sector because I was invited along to a meeting with corporates to talk about social value. And I quickly realized that that's not really what they were interested in. They were actually interested in impact. They wanted to know where they could make an impact by working together. And social value was just an accounting term to them almost, but they want to know where they make an impact. So I said, this is what we're thinking of doing with the Social Value Act and procurement, expecting them to kick back a little bit when we got into contractual obligations, but quite the opposite. They were actually very supportive of it. And the reason they were supportive of it is that certainly some of the people in the room were doing some genuinely good stuff in terms of their social contribution, their CSR or ESG objectives, but it wasn't getting recognised. It was being ignored. Nobody asked them about it once they'd secured the contract. So they wanted the recognition and acknowledgement to what they're doing, and by making it a contract obligation was the way of doing that. So that's what we're trying to do, is to turn it around so that it's all about impact and it's not about a box ticking exercise, which I think it probably is at the moment. There are some good examples. I was invited by the housing team at the West Midlands Combined Authority, which shows that I've got people listening, at least anyway, to help them evaluate some contracts that are bids for a big housing development they had over in Sunderland, I think it was. And I was actually really quite impressed by the way that the housing team had approached it in terms of the ITT. They'd really thought about it, and they'd really decided where it was they wanted social impact. And it was about community space and environment and energy. And the questions and the way that they posed that question was actually really clever. And the stuff they got back from the bidders was really quite impressive. And it went beyond what you would normally expect to see in a tender. So there are good examples around.
It's just become a bit of a box ticking
Yeah,
process and a bit gamified, and people just
yeah.
think they're playing a bit of a game and they can throw anything
Well,
in there and not be held accountable for any
yeah.
of it.
I got personal experience of Social Value Act. I'm not going to say who the company was, but a large company bidding for a public sector contract. In my previous role at the School for Social Entrepreneurs, they asked me to be their social value partner and write something for their bid. And when they secured the contract, I went, congratulations, where's the check? Because that was involved, they would pay me. And suddenly it was, oh, well, we're not sure about that now, actually, that things have changed a bit. And it was like pulling teeth, getting the money out of them. I got there, but that's because I'm just stubborn and determined. But I know there was one other partner that I had in there who's never seen a penny from them. That's not right. But I also had an example with a commercial business company, a private sector company, who was bidding for a contract, secured it, and the deal was that we would, in order for, as a social value partner, they would subcontract at least 10% of this contract to us. We were an assembly and packing organisation at Colbert Trust at the time, and they were good to their word. In fact, we got more than 10%. The contract was £6 million, so we got 10% of that, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, so it does work. It can work, but it needs to be done in a way that's more genuine rather than ticking boxes and just. I think making intrinsic value part of the decision-making process and making equal to additional value is not a bad way of helping social enterprises, because they already do some amazing stuff. So if they can communicate that within the bid, they've got a much better chance, an equal chance, in fact, and breaking contracts down to smaller sizes as well.
Definitely, that's, I think, one of the biggest problems with the social value criteria at the moment is that it doesn't value the things that the
Yeah,
social enterprises and social economy deliver on a day-to-day basis. It just ignores that. It wants something different or on top of that, which is a
yeah.
shame, really.
Well, everything I've commissioned so far, there's one big one, which is £1.7 million. I broke it down into 6 lots. And I had to fight procurement to allow me to do that, because they were going, that's just more work, isn't it? We could end up with 6 suppliers. And I'm going, yeah, you could actually. But hey, that's what it's about. And it was in order to get over the financial criteria that goes, because not many organisations would be able to deliver a single contract of £1.7 million. But there were several local organisations who could deliver it if it was broken down into smaller chunks. So we broke it down into 6 lots, and we ended up with 5 suppliers in the end. But that worked.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all part of the new need to have targets for spend with
Yeah.
GCSEs next year
Yeah.
and SMEs later this year.
Honestly, I'm not a big fan of setting targets.
No.
So set a minimum target. And what actually happens is that the minimum becomes the maximum, because it's the default for anyone.
Yeah.
We got a minimum target of 10%, or we'll make the social value about 10%. of the contract. And I think that's probably a mistake. I've just read Manchester City Council's social value policy, and I think it's brilliant. And they're achieving, for most contracts, 20% of the weighting in the contract of social value. And then if it happens to have a contribution to net zero, that's another 10%. So it's up to 30%. And that's because they didn't set a target. And I think if you don't set a target, there's a fair chance that you could go above the 10%. I did a little exercise with some of the people in the Combined Authority who said, look, if you could extract something from this contract that would allow you to do something that you couldn't, what weighting would you give it in the contract? And they were talking about things like 40%. As soon as I mentioned social value, they went down to 10 again.
Because that's what it was saying, minimum of 10%.
It's
Yeah.
to do with the
Yeah.
language and understanding of it. It's social value, I will make that 10%. So I think the language you use is important.
Yeah. And I've always said we should have a third for quality, a third for price, and a third for social value in tenders.
Yeah.
And that way, then you've got to be serious about each aspect of it to win.
Yeah, and I think if we're looking to get best value in the widest sense, a Bombardier example, then if you put social value equal to quality and price, then you will make different decisions, and you'll probably make the decisions that are better for the overall cost, including the social cost of some of the things that we might do.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably where most people are going wrong, in that they're not thinking in advance about what kind of impact they want to have.
The one thing we wanted to try and do at the Combined Authority is actually have a social value post, a strategic post. I think there's been a mistake with social value in some areas where it's been seen as a job for procurement teams, and it's not. Procurement are there to manage a process. You need to take a step back from that and actually think, from a strategic point of view, what do we want to do with this tool, this piece of leverage, and have somebody think about, oh, we want to do this, and then procurement will manage it. But because it's always been put on procurement as a task, they've gone, this is just another job to do. Understandably, they're not going to approach it in the same way that somebody who can stand back and say, okay, here are the big issues in the region. What do we want to do about them? And how can we use this device to be able to tackle those things? Then you've got a different focus and a different value. So if we can get somebody in post and help them educate the commissioners rather than the procurement staff, then we can maybe make some changes and differences.
We need a long-term social value plan which says these are all the bits that we want to deliver for the West Midlands or whatever region, and this is how we're going to use the procurement process to do it. I'm liking this a lot. I think there's a lot of promise there in changing it. And I know there's a lot of the sector in terms of social enterprises and charities and what your class as the social economy sector have been really disappointed with how social value is played out, in that it hasn't really delivered for them.
No, it hasn't delivered for them, and that's the bit where we need to change. And that's all about what I found within the Combined Authority is actually it's been a lot easier to talk to people and convince people of the value. It's all about building awareness and understanding, and sometimes seeing is believing. So things like the social economy drive are quite important. But there's a huge willingness, because I think we're all human beings at the end of the day, and so are they. And some of them get involved in a lot of stuff outside the Combined Authority that's charitable or in some way. So there is a real willingness there for people. So they do want to understand. And I think once you help them to understand what the social economy looks like and how it works and what it does and what the value it contributes, then they start to think this is a really important thing that we should be using. I think there's a real willingness. I think the reason I've been successful in getting it into business plans and things is because people have been prepared to do that, because they have been able to make the connection between this thing called the social economy that they didn't really understand and was all a bit messy, and into seeing it as a resource that can actually deliver against their goals as well. So I've had some brilliant support from people. My three best friends at Combined Authority is the guy in finance, the guy in procurement, and the guy in legal, because they can get me through the process quicker than anyone else. Or if they didn't like it, they could stop it.
So you need to keep on their good side.
Oh, no, they've been absolutely brilliant. I've got three people in the Combined Authority who I think the world of, because they really are helping me enormously. There's quite a few others, actually, who will keep asking the question about what about the social economy? Shouldn't we have rules? So, yeah.
And obviously the social value stuff that can be delivered, the social value bit that the social economy could deliver, that's just one slice really, because they've got all the other bits that the combined authority does where the social economy could be
Yeah,
engaged.
the thing that we're working on is building an ecosystem that at the moment's got 10 different elements to it. So it's things like policy, business support, access to funding, access to finance, creating markets, and that's about creating markets with the private sector as well as the public sector, procurement, the place-based developments, building the profile, partnership working, which is two elements of partnership working, and I think they're both important. One is about partnerships with the public and private sector, but there's also partnerships within the sector as well. So building those partnership working or consortium or whatever you want to call them, so that they can deliver at scale and they can multiply that impact. There's a thing around education. I'm determined before I shuffle off this planet or get fired or something. In Scotland, the Social Enterprise Academy runs a program
Yeah.
at schools. It's using social enterprise to engage kids in doing something. And what the kids are learning is about communication skills and teamworking skills and project management skills and budgeting and finance skills. All those really important life skills that are transferable. And it's really working successfully. 80% of schools in Scotland are using this program as part of that engagement with kids, and the feedback's been amazing. So we have an education, employment and skills team with a large budget in the Combined Authority, and I'm determined to get them to buy into this and
Yeah.
get this out in schools. It has actually been done. Schools in the Black Country used it, and it worked really well. I'm trying to dig this information out about that and sell this into schools, people, and get that into schools. Education is also about just educating people about what it is exactly. So me trawling through a database of 9,314 organisations is part of that. Because if I can paint a picture of exactly what the social economy is like, it will it will help their understanding, and also it will help me understand where we should be targeting things to. Because some of the organisations in that 9,314 aren't going to be part of a growth story, but they are part of something else. There's a vast array of faith organisations in the West Midlands across all different faiths. They're not social enterprises as such, but they are important because very often they're bidding grounds for social enterprises. So the activity that they do and they support does actually generate social enterprises like Chelmsford Cross Fish and Chip Shop emanates from the Chelmsford Wood Baptist Church. That's how that started. And Helping Hands and Solihull, which is from Renewal Christian Centre. They're a really important part. So it's about that understanding of it as well. And then we're looking at subsectors. So we're going to do a business support program in the new year for organisations working to either create employment or support people in employment, and organisations working specifically in health and social care. And part of that is about getting the employment team to understand how important social enterprise is to creating employment for disadvantaged people, and to the NHS how important the social economy is in delivering contracts. And they're watching it and keen to work with anyone who goes through that programme, suppliers and health and social care.
Sounds brilliant. So, uh, as a final question, is there anything else that you'd like to share that you're up to?
We're going to be doing something on social finance soon, and creating a fund that will offer affordable finance packages and blended finance to organisations. I can't tell you much more about that at the moment, but it will be happening fairly soon. More importantly, the part that we're working on is actually involving putting boots on the ground. So having somebody who's able to go out and explain the social finance to organisations who might be considering it or it might be right for them. Because it's one of those, finance is one of those complex products that you need somebody to explain it to you, go through the pros and cons and work out what's right for you. You can't just rely on a website and the good finance tool, great as they are, but they're not going to overcome the lack of confidence or concerns or fears that the organisations have. So we're going to be working with a provider to do that. And again, my categorization of 9,314 organisations is to find the 100 or so that are probably should be looking at social investment rather than grant funding. And we'll start with them and see
Uh,
if we can lift the use of social investment rather than reliance on grant funding.
yeah, because the West Midlands has got quite a low rate of social
It has,
investment,
yeah.
hasn't it?
And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And part of it is the West Midlands social economy is far more diverse than in other parts of the country. Believe it or not, I mean, we have it's a very diverse region anyway. But there are cultures and faiths that where borrowing money is a little bit more complicated
Yeah.
than it is elsewhere. And also the fact that the infrastructure, Social Enterprise West Midlands used to do quite a lot of work in promoting finance.
Yeah.
Melanie obviously ended up in Petersonite Capital. But that doesn't exist, and that hasn't existed for quite some time. So there's nobody there championing the cause or building any awareness or education around social investment. So if we can get more people on the ground going around investing people and working with the boards, because it's quite often it's not the social entrepreneur that's the problem, it's their boards of trustees who are risk averse, but they need to understand what it's about and help overcome their fears.
Yeah, definitely. Charles, it's been lovely talking to you today. If people want to find out more about what you're up to, where's the best place for them to go?
But if they go to the West Midlands Combined Authority website, which is wmca.org.uk, I think, yeah, and there's a link that says what we do. If they click on the what we do link and then scroll down, you'll see an item on social economy. And if you click on that, it goes through and it talks about all the stuff we're doing about the ecosystem, how they can get involved. So there's social economy forums that happen at BSEC run on our behalf and round tables as well. They can get involved in that. The plan that I'm working to was actually developed by people within the social economy. It's not my plan. I'm just there to try and make it actually happen. But it was a ground up plan. The social economy forums and round tables are an important part of what I do because that's my to-do list. That's where I get my ideas from. That's, Sarah Bowman has a meeting and I have a to-do list
Yeah,
at the start of that meeting.
I've been to them, so I know what it's like.
So they're important places. So people can get involved in that, and then they can find all the stuff we're doing about business and place support, finance and contracts, and all those sorts of things. But that's how to do it. But yeah, if they can get along to the social economy forums, that's how they can not just find out, but they can actually get involved and shape some of the stuff that we do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charles. It's been really good talking to you.
All right, you take care, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Make an Impact podcast. I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who want to create positive change. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and learn more about my work at makeanimpactcic.co.uk. Until next time, let's keep making an impact in the world.